Welcome to episode 260, From Homeless to Hero, Redesigning Your Life with Michael Unbroken. Welcome to the Be That 1% podcast. I'm your host, James Silvis, mindset specialist and performance coach. And here on the show, I'm going to challenge you to think deeper, commit to greatness, and develop a stronger mindset. You'll hear stories from those who are living life on their terms, and you'll receive strategies that will help you level up. So the question is, are you ready to be your own 1%? Let's get started. Welcome back, everybody, to the Be That 1% podcast. I am super excited today. Get to connect with someone who I recently just met through a mutual friend. Michael Unbroken joins me in the studio today, and I've had the honor of looking him up and figuring out what he stands for, who he is, and excited to dive into all that he knows. And just a little bit about him before we jump into some rapid fire questions here. He was homeless at one point and then decided to become the hero of his own story, which I have a lot of questions about. He is the founder of Think Unbroken, a best-selling author, award-winning speaker, podcast host of Think Unbroken, which is ranked in top 0.5% of all podcasts. So go check that out. He's a coach and an advocate for adult survivors of childhood trauma. And like I said, mutual friends to someone who's recently been on the podcast, and Tori Gordon. So without further ado, man, welcome to the show.
Thanks, dude. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So let's get the audience to know you quick and in a hurry here. So where were you born and raised?
Indianapolis, Indiana.
Okay. What's a philosophy that you live by?
No excuses, just results.
Beautiful. What's a book in the past that you've read that offered immense value for you?
The Alchemist.
I love that book. Piece of advice that has served you well?
Don't be a little bitch.
I could see how that could be helpful for sure. What does the world need more of right now?
Accountability.
Amen to that. All right. So my first question for you is, you were homeless at one point. I don't know the duration. I don't know how long. I don't know where that was. Maybe it was in Indianapolis where you're from. But what would you say was the story, the question, or the series of events that led to a transformation or a transition from out of being poor or homeless to now becoming the hero of your story?
Yeah, it's the life journey.
Right.
And a lot of that was out of my control. From 8 to 12 years old, I lived with 30 different families.
Wow.
Getting bounced around place to place to place, never knew where I was going to be, living with friends of my mom and my stepdad, the church, strangers, vans, sleeping outside of wherever. We never knew. And my brothers and I were always separated from each other. We didn't get to grow up together. My mom was a drug addict and alcoholic. Stepdad, super abusive, only ever met my real father one time. And so it was just consummate chaos, right? And so from 8 to 12, I'm getting bounced around place to place to place. And the summer before my freshman year of high school, I was living in a house that we were renting with no electricity, no running water, no air conditioning in August. Blistering hot Indiana summer, right? And my mom had just disappeared. So I was literally by myself. And all of those things kind of like lay this track work where now suddenly my grandmother adopts me when I'm 12. And like, that's a godsend in a lot of ways, but I'm biracial, I'm black and white. And my grandma's an old racist ass white lady from a town in Tennessee you never heard of, right? So now I'm having this identity crisis. I start doing drugs when I'm 12. By 13, I'm drinking every day. And by 15, I got kicked out of school for selling drugs, right? Because I was like fucking stupid because I'm 15 and just trying to survive the world that I'm in, doing what I thought was the thing that people do in that world. Fast forward a long time and a lot more story I'm sure we'll get into, but effectively, like I'm 26, I'd made almost $1 million working for a Fortune 10 company, no high school diploma, no college education. But dude, I'm 350 pounds, smoking 2 packs a day, drinking myself to sleep, $50,000 in debt. Imagine that, living paycheck to paycheck, making 150 grand a year, right? My car got repoed. I got cheating on my girlfriend for the 8 billionth time. And my little brother says, never talk to me again. You're not my brother. Right. So all of these things it's a domino effect. I mean, you can like track these dots from 1 to 25 to now 37, heading into 38 years old. And the thing that happened at 25 and 26 is I just hit rock bottom. There's no two ways about it. Like, you know how when people who are dying will be like, I think I got like 6 weeks or I got like a year. You can feel it. Dude, I knew I was going to be dead in a year at 26 years old. Either I was going to kill myself or someone was going to kill me or God knows what. Right. But like I was in a very, very dark place. So I always try to tell people like, I know what it's like to hate yourself. I know what it's like to not want to wake up in the morning. I know what it's like to have what feels like everything in your world stripped and taken away from you. And I know what it's like to show up and live your life on your terms every day.
Yeah.
That's that hero's journey. Like this is the thing now that I've been able to help thousands of people around the world step into. But it started with me. And that's what I always try to frame for people. It's like, dude, I'm not an anomaly. I don't know anything you don't know except one thing. And that's that mentality of no excuses, just results. The reason I said don't be a little bitch earlier is because that's something that Grant Cardone talks about a lot, right? And people will reference him in this personal development space. But I've had the time to actually spend with Grant. He invested in Think Unbroken. Like he is somebody that has mentored me in a lot of ways over the course of the last few years. And that's not the connotation of, gender, right? If you're being a bitch, you're being a bitch. And I thought about that a lot when I was younger because that's effectively being a victim, right? You're bitching, you're complaining, you're not showing up, you're blaming the world. It's your fault, my family's fault, the parents' fault, community's fault, school's fault, Obama's fault. Bro, it's everybody's fault except your fault, right? Which leads down that path to accountability.
Right.
And I remember when I'm hitting this rock bottom moment, 26 years old, I'm laying in bed. It's a Saturday morning. Bro, I'm 350 pounds, eating chocolate cake, smoking a joint, and watching the fucking CrossFit games, right? Rock bottom. And I pick myself up and I go look at myself in the bathroom mirror. And I don't know where this came from, but I asked myself a question. I said, what are you willing to do to have the life that you want to have? And the answer was no excuses, just results.
Was that a question that you had asked before? Or was that the first time that you've asked
First time I ever asked it. I don't even know where it came from, right? It was like the universe, source, God was like talking into me and they're like, look, fucker, do something. And it's funny, those 5 questions I've actually kind of like tied into everything we're talking about. There's something about accountability in one's own life that is the differentiating factor between success and failure. I love the concept of the 1%, right? I know that you probably get shit in general just for having your show called that, but it's like, why would you not want to be?
Yeah.
Why do you want to be a part of what everyone else has created? Why do you want to be a victim? Why do you want to live within the matrix of the societal structures that are laid out and presented in front of us where normal is okay? Dude, I don't want a normal life. I know what a normal life is. I know what it's like to be on food stamps and have government housing and to not be able to pay your bills and to have collectors calling your house every day, to get beat up by your parents, to not have a high school diploma, to be basically fucking illiterate. And I know what it's like to be on the other side and to now having written books and the podcast and be on billboards in fucking Times Square, and to sit next to people like you. And it's like, I'd much rather have this fucking side.
Yeah,
right? Sure. It's not even close.
That's beautiful, man. Thank you for sharing that. When you were moving to so many different places, 30 places, I think you said, maybe you weren't aware of this, but what belief did you grab onto in those moments that you think either supported you or did not support you, that you've either changed or doubled down on?
That's a really great question. So one is that I didn't matter, right? My mom doesn't love me. My stepdad doesn't love me, which, I mean, there's a lot of supporting evidence that why would any child not believe that to be true?
Sure, yeah.
I mean, at 4 years old, my mother cut off my right index finger, multiple surgeries, multiple skin grafts. She was psychotic. My stepdad was super fucking abusive, right? 6'4", 220 linebacker beating up a 7-year-old, right? And then now, not only am I not safe in my own home, but we don't even have a home.
Right.
We're getting evicted constantly. I'm sleeping at my grandma's house. I'm sleeping on my cousin's bedroom floor. I'm sleeping at strangers' house. Dude, there were days where like, I didn't even know the people I was with. We were just with people, right? And so I'm sitting here 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, separated at times from my brothers. My sister lived with her father, which thank God she didn't have to go through that shit. But I was constantly in this like whirlpool where it's like, where am I? What is happening? What is going on? How did I get here? Who are you? Am I going to eat today? Am I going to get to take a bath today? Like all of those things. And so I felt like any kid would, a massive sense of abandonment, right? What happened in that is two things occurred that actually have played a huge role in my life. One, I'm incredibly good at reading people. Like it is my fucking superpower. I would argue there's not many people on planet Earth who are better at reading energy than me, right? Because I had to. It became fucking survival. And two, that level of abandonment made me hyper independent. And hyper independence led me down this path, which simultaneously destroyed my life, but has also given me the ability to show up at the space and clip in which I show up. Both of those things, being and having the feeling of not mattering, really destroyed everything around me. Because if I don't believe I matter to the world, but that starts internally, well, what happens? Well, I'm going to destroy my life. 350 pounds, 2 packs a day, drinking myself to sleep, right? Ostracized from my brothers. Friends don't want to be my friends anymore. Like it's fucking chaos. But the hyper independence element of it meant that I effectively had put up such a big wall that I wouldn't let anyone in at any time. And so there was a period of time where somewhere around 15 years, I didn't cry. Not one tear, one fucking time.
Did you feel like it, but you just didn't let yourself?
Oh man, it was so removed. There's absolutely no way that was going to happen.
Got it.
No fucking way. Right. And so like my grandmother died, my mother died, my 3 childhood best friends have been murdered. Bro, I didn't shed a fucking tear. And then I realized one day I was thinking like, am I a sociopath? Right? Because I was so like driven to this idea of this is what it means to be a man, which is predicated on emotions literally getting beat out of me as a kid. Right? So this is really, really heavy. I'm going to answer your question. I'm going to bring this. I want to create that context so I could close the loop. Today, the transition, the thing that I learned from those experiences of homelessness based on and predicated on those, all of that tremendous amount of pain and torture has done 2 things. It made me, one, realize and understand that no one else is ever going to make me love me more than I love myself based on my actions, my integrity, my honesty, and my values. Also my boundaries and who it is that I choose to be based on my moral character. And then 2, that same hyper independence that put up a wall is the very thing that has allowed me to push the wall down to open up the floodgates to do what I do today.
I love that. So in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Dr. Covey talks about 3 types of relationships: dependent, independent, and then interdependent. Being that you grew up and developed that independence that you're talking about, maybe the lone wolf, kind of like do it yourself, protect yourself, show up for you kind of thing. Have you made the transition into interdependence where you align yourself with now other independent forces and together solve a problem or, go after certain goals or live life in a certain way? Have you made that jump? Do you suggest that jump? Being that you spent a large part of your life being independent?
Yeah. So yes and no. Here's why. I'm still not a team player. I'll never pretend that I am. It just, the way that I have kind of reconciled that is looking at it very simply and asking myself a question. Do I have the ability to co-create with someone based on mutual agreement of what I believe is the right decision? Right? That is something that as a leader is really difficult because I live and die by that sword.
Yeah.
Right. And between the companies that I run, we have multiple employees. I have multiple people on my team, and there's always space. Here's what I think about, and I tell my team, there's always space for you to bring to the table everything. But ultimately, I'm making the right decision that I believe based on my intuition, gut experience, and expertise.
Sure.
And if I'm wrong, right? But I, generally speaking, have found that the way that I'm able to navigate those relationships is people have to understand, like from a business perspective, I know where I'm going. From a friendship perspective, this is where it gets really interesting. From a friendship and relationship and family perspective, dude, I'm like, let's meet in the middle, always, 100% of the time, because reciprocation and that value of energy is everything to me, right? So I am surrounded. I literally have the greatest friends in the world. The relationship with my brothers is completely different than it used to be. The way that I think about intermingling with human beings across the board is about reciprocation and co-creation. So it's almost like I've compartmentalized it because there's a dichotomy. Because on one hand, there's the interdependence, the hyper independence that is required to be an effective leader and the willingness to live and die by your decisions. And then there's the reconciliation that doesn't bring value to other people's lives. So when I'm creating with my friends, people I'm dating or a relationship, my family, it's like, I don't have to be in charge of all this shit. I don't have to be the leader all the time. Right. I'm not saying that doesn't still hold true, but I'm just saying I've allotted the space to realize like, it's okay to have support from other people, to meet them in the middle and to both give and receive the energy. Because when you can acknowledge that the entirety of the human experience is built on community and reconcile the fact that you've been lied to, I was lied to and told that people are bad. That's the reconciliation. You have to go and find proof and evidence supporting the opposite.
Which is hard to do.
Which is incredibly difficult to do. And what's most hard about it is most people who are going to be in your friends, in your relationships, your community, one of the issues that people always fall into, and I've fallen into this as well, is not being crystal clear about the value that you bring into each other's lives.
Yeah.
And that's where people get stuck. And they're like, oh, I'm just going to be this person's friend because they showed up. And I'm like, think about the time, effort, energy, and money that's being involved in that communication, that relationship, that thing that you're building, and ask yourself, are you getting the value out of it? And I know it's a really weird thing to try to understand the value of a relationship because monetarily you can't. That's stupid. You should never approach it like that. But think about time, right? And that element that we have in terms of the energy that we're putting in a segment that is the one thing we don't get more of, right? And you hear people say all the time is the most important thing that we have. And it's like, that's so true. So why are you hanging out with people that take from you? I mean, are your parents, your friends, your relationship, the fucking job you have? Why, if the only resource that you cannot find more of, no matter how much you seek it, there's a great abundance in the world, right? Now, of course, you can get into quantum and things of that nature, which I don't think we should right now. But when you step into that, you realize time is infinite, right? So on a long, like when you look at the universe as a whole, it's infinite, but we don't live in the universe. We live in this moment right now. And so what I've been able to do is trust my gut. This is the thing I always encourage people to do. Trust yourself about these people in your life.
Yeah.
Just trust you're never going to be wrong, dude. Let me ask you a question. I know it's your show, but I'm going to ask you a question.
Of course.
Have you ever in your life said, I knew I should have trusted my brain?
Oh, yeah.
Or has it always, wait,
well, yeah.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Or has it always been, I knew I should have trusted my gut when it comes to people?
I think I would use gut more than brain, yeah.
Almost entirely.
Yes.
Your brain's a liar, dude.
Yeah.
Your brain doesn't know
There's
anything
an
except
overanalyzer, overthinker.
Yeah. But your gut's never wrong, right? Yeah. People talk about the power of the gut is 4 times the power of the brain, right? It's just trusting your organism, trusting the energy, right? The reciprocity of that.
Do you think that people need to self-reflect in order to find the stillness to listen to that? Because from what I see, I think a lot of people live distracted lives. They're busy, they're doing things that maybe they shouldn't be, they're not enforcing boundaries, they're not speaking their truth, and that can create a very convoluted system. And so I do think that there are moments where those intuitive nudges come through, but if you're not clear or aware that that's coming through, then how do you develop the relationship with that, right? So what are your suggestions on building that trust with the gut if people don't know what that is, or they're wondering is that my gut or is it my brain?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it's a feeling,
Mm-hmm.
right? Can you articulate what you're feeling, right? Think about this. Like, I know this is probably unfair, but it's just factual. What is the feeling you have when you go to a car dealership, right? Generally speaking, it's always kind of grimy, right? I'm not saying there's not good car salesmen out there, because there are, but historically we all have data that support that these guys are super pushy, and they're like, sign the paper of intent. And you're like, dude, leave me alone. Like, if I want to buy the car, I'll buy the car, right? And so you have this thing, but in order to trust that and not make emotional decisions,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which ends up happening all the time. Car dealers they're fucking great salespeople, right? We make emotional decisions about everything because we haven't taken the space and the time
Right.
to sit in it and name it,
Yes.
right? Emotional buyers, arbitrary stat, emotional buyers, generally speaking, regret their buying decision. Analytical buyers, generally speaking, are like, I made the right choice.
Mm-hmm.
We are both. We are analytical and we are also emotional. But you can't trust your emotions until you can sit in them and acknowledge them and make meaning of them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so the only way that I have found, and this is for me, I'm not saying this is for everyone, but for me, it's been in the practice of yoga,
Mm-hmm.
in meditation,
Mm-hmm.
in climbing hills and tops of mountains and just sitting there and nothing and watching the sunset with a journal. It's waking up every day with intention and finding the space to be present, recognizing that the past doesn't matter and the future hasn't happened, so it actually doesn't matter either. And just asking myself to, can I, with the meaning that I've made of the experience of yesterday, give myself the space to continue to grow today?
Mm-hmm.
And then take the lessons of today and bring them in tomorrow, so I don't have to repeat the same stupid shit I do all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't do that if you're going 100 miles an hour all day, every single day.
That's right.
Which is unfortunately the world that we live in right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's so fast paced. I mean, and you hear people talk about this all the time, and I don't like to be the guy to talk about the same shit as everyone else, but like, go and take inventory of your calendar. What are you actually doing? Right? Where are you actually investing your time? First and foremost, into yourself. Then I tell people, like, you cannot go serve the world if you can't first take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't first show up for you. And people feel this call. We're like, I got to do all the things all the time. No, you don't. I promise you 99% of the shit that you're doing doesn't actually matter.
Right.
Right. And this is where it gets interesting, because if you can understand that and you can give yourself permission to be like, actually, it doesn't matter whether or not I take this 25 minutes to meditate at the end of the day, because it doesn't, like, on the long enough time horizon. But in the moment, it matters tremendously, this idea of presence.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're in these places about making decisions about the people in your life, what are you doing to create the space so you can understand and make meaning of your experience with them?
Mm-hmm.
Right? This is why when it's so funny, dude, when I'm going to fucking butcher this statistic, but I saw this crazy statistic recently. It was something like 17 to 22% of divorces are initiated after vacation. Why? Because you got time. You're not distracted by the world.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of dealing with the problems that had led up to that vacation,
Mm-hmm.
where you finally are alone and by yourselves and you're sitting next by the person,
Yeah.
right? Instead of creating the time in which you could have solved the problems that led to the place where on the vacation you made the decision that you're going to end your relationship. What if you had done that leading up and knocked out those dominoes on the way, instead of the house of cards falling on you in the moment in which you finally found peace?
Yeah.
Because this is what I always teach my clients. You want to find out what's going on in your life? Sit in silence.
Amen. I love that. I think it's great advice. I think everyone listening should do some version of that, however long. Start with 10 minutes.
Start with 6. Who cares?
Yeah.
It's an arbitrary number. Just start.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly. Slow, still the mud. So in my work with men specifically, do you find that men believe emotions are liabilities? Part one question. And then the next part is, where And where do they not become liabilities if people do view them as liabilities?
I think emotions are only a liability if you don't know how to control them.
I agree.
And so I will say this. What are the emotions most commonly associated with men? Anger. Right?
Yeah.
That's what we always go. That's the go-to, right?
Yeah.
People are like, men are angry. No, we're not. No, we're not. But we haven't been given the space to emotionally process.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so whereas anger is our like explosion, for women, it's shut down, generally speaking. Right. They emotionally close off. We emotionally explode.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why? Because realistically, neither of us are really giving each other the space to have difficult conversations about the emotions that we're feeling and having in real time.
Yes.
Especially ourselves. We try to stuff it down. I mentioned earlier, I felt like when I was younger, I was like, am I a sociopath?
Mm-hmm.
Well, think about this. The context around emotions is always boys don't cry, man up. Now, that context of don't be a little bitch is really interesting because most people hear that and they're like, wipe yourself off, put some dirt on it. When I think about it, I'm like, don't let the world dictate your circumstances, right? When I think about the emotional aptitude that we have to go and create the life that we want to have, most of the blockages that we face as men, and this is speaking as a man, because I don't understand what it's like to be a woman, but speaking as a man, the number one blockage that we have is the fear of failure, right? We're not going to live up to the expectations of society, of world, of our wife, of our children, of ourselves, of our, the whole thing. And there's so much pressure.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it becomes a liability because now instead of being able to name it and be like, I'm fucking sad, you're like, I'm going to explode and destroy my life, right? Instead of having joy, right? Which is also a very hard emotion for men to have where it's like, no, dude, you can be happy. It's fucking fine. Like it's fine to be happy. The world is not going to end because you had some bliss.
Mm-hmm.
We stuff it down. Now I do think there's a place to be stoic and zen and understand how to navigate the world.
Sure.
But what happens is these emotions, they become liabilities the more that we stuff them down.
Yeah.
Because eventually they're going to show up.
Right. I think true stoicism is understanding your emotions so much so that when they come up, you're not as affected by them as if you didn't take the time to do that.
And I would go even deeper on that is that in the moment that they come up, you can name it immediately.
Yeah.
Right.
So
one of the things that I've been able to do really effectively to go from almost non-communicative in any capacity to overly communicative, because I was trying to figure out the balance of the pendulum swing, to today, it's like I can sit in it immediately and I can make decisions based on my reality and the emotional state that I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so if I'm angry, right, I'm like, okay, cool. Now's not the time to go and do something XXX, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm overly happy, I'm like, okay, well, is this the time to do this, to do that? And it's navigating and naming those emotions in real time. That's a superpower for human beings.
Yes.
Now, that can come in a lot of different ways. That can come through doing therapy, things like EMDR, CBT, Gestalt, like traditional talk therapy. It can come from coaching. That's something I do with my clients. It can come from just sitting and journaling, right? But getting to that space where you can name it, that's where you have the power over it, right? Because it's like if you can't name it and if you can't give it the space to acknowledge it, it controls you. Right. And if it's controlling you, chances are you're not operating in abundance. You're probably not being very efficient. You're probably not being a good leader for whatever it means to you to be a man, which is different for all of us.
Sure.
Because look, dude, I think about it too every single day because I'm the same dude who I love to shoot my guns. I roll jujitsu and do martial arts like Muay Thai. I will cook a steak in a heartbeat, but I'm also going to cry when commercials come on, do fucking yoga, meditate, and journal. Right. Hold my girl's hand when we're walking down the street if I have a girl, right? Whatever. And it's like you can do both, but you can't step into whatever you define as a man if you can't define who you are as a man. And I think that starts with emotions.
Yes.
And not being victim and subjugated to them, but instead controlling them. And what's funny is controlling emotions is not about hiding from them. It's about, okay, it's in front of me. What is happening? What am I going to do about it? If you need to cry, bro, cry. Seriously. Stop being a little bitch. Cry. It's fine. Right?
That's just the how society sees us as a contradictory. Don't be a bitch, but now I'm gonna cry.
Yeah.
Right? That's great. I love that, man. So you talk about trauma, obviously it's something, it's part of the work that you do with your clients. How do you define? I know everyone probably has their own definition, but what is trauma to you?
Yeah. Well, look, man, it's the ramification of these really painful experiences that we've been through.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everyone's been hurt. Like nobody comes out of childhood unscathed. Though, and if they think that they did, those are the people I'm generally most concerned about.
Right.
Cause I'm like, it just ain't happened yet. Whatever that thing is where your breakdown's coming, like it's around the corner. Right. And trauma, like the experience itself will create the next aspects of it. Right. The hurt, the loss, the grief, the suffering, the shift in identity, the breakdown of emotions, the feeling, the stuckness, the loss, the pain, all of those things come from the experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, when I think about the trauma itself, it's like there is the experience of the trauma, and that stuff comes and goes, right? You think you break your finger will heal, right? But you always have had a broken finger, and then it will not be broken anymore, right? With trauma, the thing that happens is it's an emotional breakage that shifts your identity, that becomes the cornerstone of everything that you are. And the hard part about that is we have a really strong sense of the unwillingness to do anything about it, except hyperbolically, right? Where people will sit in and they'll be like, I'm doing the work. And I'm like, what does that mean, bro? Woman, person, what does that mean? What work are you doing? Because if you're continuing to have the same behavioral patterns because of experience that happened 30 years ago, I don't think that you're doing the work. I think that you're finding reasons to say that you are, because that's fucking cool and hip right now. And look, man, I'll be honest, I didn't sign up to be the trauma guy. I want nothing to do with this, actually. But I sit and I think about, why did all these terrible things happen to me? These massively traumatic experiences. Some things, like, to be honest with you, I'll never say publicly. It's for my coach, my journal, and my therapist.
Yeah.
Because they're so fucking dark. Dude, I have seen humanity at its darkest. Stuff that if I told you right now, you would probably question everything. And so those experiences were so traumatic to me. Watching the abuse, watching the pain, watching the hurt, watching people who are supposed to love you the most love you the least. That's trauma, right? I'm carrying these burdens of all of these experiences. The event is over, but the pain of the event is carrying. That's the trauma. And then it's like, well, okay, cool. Well, what do you do about it? And then that ultimately becomes the next question.
Yeah. Do you, in your work of managing it, navigating it, healing it, understanding it, did you find that was a motivator for you, or not so much?
What is that?
The trauma itself, the feeling that you had from it, the experience, the turmoil that came from it, I guess. Did you use that as a motivator or no?
So here's the way I look at it. I didn't know what else to do. So I was willing to do anything.
Okay.
You know, when I started getting deeper into doing because it started like this, right? So I'll give you a little more context. I think this will help answer the question. So at 25, heading into 26, I hit rock bottom, have this moment on the bed watching CrossFit games. The next 4 years of my life are the hardest 4 years of my life. 26 to 30 was like, dude, one step forward, a million steps backwards. Because there was an identity shift happening. I didn't have the words like I have now to be able to name certain things, because it was like, I'm going to go to therapy and I'm going to read personal development books. I'm going to listen to podcasts, even though they weren't really podcasts back then, right? I'm going to do whatever it takes that's in front of me. That whole no excuses, just results mentality. I mean, to the point, dude, I even borrowed money from friends to pay for therapy. Right. Because I was like that dead set. Because I was 50 grand in debt. I didn't have any money. And I was like, whatever it takes, keep showing up, keep showing up, keep showing up. And slowly what I started to do was unravel all of the chaos. Because one of the unfortunate powers, for lack of a better term, that I have is I have a fucking ironclad memory. Like, it's disgusting. I remember everything. I'll remember your shirt and your watch and everything. It's not photographic, but it's environmental.
Mm.
So I'll remember these experiences. I remember stuff that is so insane to remember, like the shirt that my grandmother had on, like when I graduated second grade.
Mm.
Dumb shit like that. So I have this incredible memory where today, or end the journey, I should say, where that memory, as I was stepping deeper into the work, all these things would pop up and they would be very, when as before they were stuffed down, now they were emotionally impacting me. Right. And so I was feeling the emotions I was never allowed to feel.
Mm-hmm.
And so what started to happen in those emotions, whether it be anger or sadness or grief or despair, most of it was negative. Like I don't really have any good childhood memories. They're very, very few and far in between. So I'm sitting here, I'm doing the work, I'm showing up to therapy, I'm getting coached, I'm like doing the whole thing. And then there's just all of this rage. Like I don't have a better word for it. It's just rage and anger and vitriol for the world. I'm like, fuck all this. And I remember I was sitting with my therapist one day and, same Wednesday, same chair, same cup of boring ass tea for years. And I looked across from him one day. I was like, dude, I want to fucking be here. Like, I'm so tired of your face. I'm like, no offense. I love you. Thank you for letting me have this space. But like, I'm so fucking tired of cleaning up another person's mess. And he was like, yeah, I don't blame you. But what are you going to do about these emotions? What are you going to do about these feelings you have? What are you going to do about this? And that's where like the shift really started to happen for me emotionally, because I realized like the thing that was stopping me was I still wasn't fully feeling the emotions.
So
Right?
you were able to maybe articulate them or to label them, but not feel them.
Exactly. So analytically, I was able to look at them and go, I assume this is what anger is. I assume this is what joy is. Like, and it was like I had to teach myself feeling, like in a literal sense. It was like I had to understand and navigate what these emotions were. So when it came to this process of healing and doing the work around the traumatic experience, the greatest growth came from acknowledging the pain that I had blocked off in childhood.
And through the feeling of it, you extract the wisdom from it. And that helps you be able to have even more pattern recognition and maybe help others identify and process their trauma or their similar situations.
I've come to realize something that's very simple. If you can't feel one emotion, you can't feel any emotions. Like I really truly believe that. Like you can't just be happy all the time, but you also can't just be angry all the time. Right. And it's like, okay, well, how do you compartmentalize emotions in a healthy way? How do you put them where they need to be? How do you not let them take over your life? And that was the thing that I started to uncover, especially as I got deeper in, right? And I started doing work like through the Gottmans and through Bessel van der Kolk and Gabor Mate and Mariel Bouquet and Dr. Caroline Leaf and Dr. Richard Folletti, and the list goes on. And I mean, I became studious about this. Like really, I studied trauma like someone would study to become a doctor. Like I've got like over 30 certifications in this and fucking 10,000 billion hours, right? About just learning all of these things. Because what started to transpire was the more that I've figured out how to name certain elements of my life, was the more I understood that I didn't know anything about who I was. And I've come to discover the key of this whole journey is know thyself.
Yeah.
And be okay with who you are.
So you knew the detached version of you.
100%. That's the best way to phrase it, which most people do.
Yeah.
And another way to phrase that is looking at it very simply through this scope of dissociation. Right. And so dissociation is this basically the separation of your brain and your body, your emotions and your physical being, where you're watching yourself from the outside perspective looking in this autonomic stress response to all the things happening. One of the things that happens through trauma is that you often find yourself in a sympathetic state, right? This is the fight, flight, freeze state, right? Whereas generally, the most ideal place to be is in the parasympathetic. One thing I always teach my clients is parasympathetic, think parachute, rescue, rest and digest, recover, heal, make meaning. And so if you're always in this cortisol-induced state where your amygdala is completely out of control, you're having all these triggered memories, you're having these emotional responses, you're in this place where your adrenaline's pumping, you're hypervigilant, you have massive ADD, you can't connect mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually with other people. It's like you're probably dissociated.
Mm-hmm.
You probably are in a survival state that is based on an experience that you had 30 years ago, right? And then the hard part, dude, the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, and I mean this genuinely, I talk about this all the time, is learn how to be angry, right? The emotion of it, not the analytical side of it, but the emotion of it. Because when you start to develop emotional capacity and emotional well-being and emotional mental fitness, the thing that happens is you're going to actually feel things,
Mm-hmm.
which is fucking terrifying. And so I'm in men's group therapy. I'm 31 years old. I'll never forget. This was only 7 years ago. Not that long ago. And so we're in this small group of dudes. We'd been in this community. I don't know. I think I was the newest. So I'd been in it for like 6 or 7 months. And there's this guy sitting across from me. And over the 6 or 7 months, we had a lot of conversations. Like it was a very uncomfortable room to be in because I put myself in that room intentionally because I realized 2 things. One, I don't have the mental capacity, the emotional capacity that I want to have in relation with men. And 2, I knew that if I wanted to heal my relationship with men in a deeper way, I need to do it in a space in which it can be proctored by someone who did it all the time, right? Because you know this as well as I do. What do dudes bond over? How many chicks you fucked, the score of the game,
Yeah.
shit that doesn't matter, dude. And I was like, I don't want that anymore. So I'm in this room and this guy says to me something that changed my life forever. It's probably, if I looked at the amount of money I've invested into therapy, this alone was worth every penny that it cost me, right? Every time I had to borrow money, every time I had to go and work extra hard, every time that I had to go hit the credit card, this one moment was worth it because it actually brought all of the things I'd been doing for 5 years together. And in that night, I had one of the biggest transformations I've ever had. So we're sitting here in this room and I'm sharing this story. I don't remember what it was. And one of the guys in the room is talking about how and I won't say names obviously, but he goes, well, this coke habit that I have is affecting my relationship with my kids. And I look at him and I go, you're a fucking asshole. You're a piece of shit. You're going to do cocaine over taking care of your children. And the other guy, he goes, what's pointing to me? He goes, what's interesting about you? You're really good at being angry, but you don't know how to process anger. And I was like, I'll fight you right now.
That's how I process. Yeah.
That's the fucking response I have because he called me out on something really interesting. And what he was saying that I derived from it as we dove deeper was I know how to break shit, but I don't know how to let the emotion exist, right? Anger, right? The very emotion you and I said, right? The one cornerstone that men always get associated with. I didn't know how to use anger. I didn't know how to let it exist. I was angry at this dude. I wanted to physically hurt him, right? Because I'm like, bitch, do you know what it's like, what you're doing to your kids? Because I went through that shit. I fucking hate you, right? And really what it was is anger is, i.e. actually I'm super fucking sad that was my childhood. I'm upset about it. I'm grieving about it. And you being the man that you are and the lack of man that you could be is impacting me in a way which I feel fucking sad. And I go home that night and I realized with what he said, I know how to break stuff. I know how to fight people. I know how to do that, but I didn't know how to just be. And I sat in this journal and I just cried for like fucking 3 hours and I wrote down everything I was mad about in the world. And it was the most present I'd ever been in my life. It was the first time I had cried in 15 years.
Wow. That's beautiful, bro.
Yeah. It changed my life. That single moment changed my life forever. Because it was the first time that in the group, I couldn't cry. Like I didn't feel safe for that. Right. But the second I got home, man, it was just like, I grabbed this journal, I sat down and it was just, I couldn't stop it.
So what was it about that question that prompted you to go home and think more about it? Like, what did that open? Was it like, did it pique your curiosity? Did you realize in that moment that you're not in control? Did you realize that you're not in balance? What did you realize from that question?
No, I realized that he was right. Like I knew how to analytically process and look at emotions, but I didn't know how to actually feel them.
But was that the first time that someone had said something so true that it hit you to
Probably
that
not,
level?
but it was probably the first time someone had said it when I was open to receive it.
Okay.
Right. And so one of the things like my little brothers would tell me all the time, they'd be like, you're an asshole. Like
Right.
you don't know how to connect with us. You don't know how to talk with us. You don't know how to be present with us. They don't use words like that,
Sure,
but you know
right.
what I'm saying,
Yeah.
right? They were like, you don't show up. Right. And that never impacted me ever because I wasn't open to receive it because that wall of hyper independence was so high.
Right.
There's no way I was going to let it in.
Right.
And then what happened was because this person had mirrored something that I needed to see, but I was in the space
In
of
the space,
openness, right? It's like you have to be willing to receive because you and I could sit here right now and you could lay something out in front of me and I could be like, well, duh, here's the reflection, here's the solution, but it may not hit you because you're not in a place of receiving.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because I'd been doing so much work, dude, it was insane. I mean, I was going to therapy like 8 times a week and I'm not joking. Like I was dedicating my whole life to it.
Mm-hmm.
I was just open for everything. And that was the willingness that I had in the journey and that I still have where I'm like, tell me the truth. Because if you see something I don't, maybe my life can be different.
Yeah.
And so it was a willingness to be open to receiving.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I'm thinking of a normal relationship where someone, may want to grow and they're angry for whatever reason, and someone says a truth bomb nugget that your therapist said to you, but it doesn't connect, or the other person maybe thinks that the other person, the person who's angry, is not open because of the anger that they're in. And usually when people are in emotion, they're kind of like, they only see red, especially with anger.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else can shut down. The logical factors aren't really activated. But yet it still got through to you. I think the space definitely helps. And I think maybe the way he said it and caught you at the right time. I'm just thinking of other contexts, not in that setting.
Mm-hmm.
If like a spouse were to say that to their husband or their wife that's angry, like how does that situation go? Do you think?
Well, not well. I mean, generally speaking,
Right.
you see that happen frequently.
Yeah.
Where people are like, don't talk to me like that.
Right.
This thought has been a very transformative thought for me in my life
Mm-hmm.
that I try to teach my clients and
Mhm.
anybody that will listen to it. What do people do in that moment? They typically throw up a guard. They're super
Yeah.
defensive. And then they'll say something like, well, you don't like it. That's your problem. This is who I am.
Mm-hmm.
This is who I am is literally the most dangerous sentence in the human language, regardless of what language you speak. It is the most dangerous because it's the ultimate fixed mindset. Because when you are willing to be like, this is who I am, you're like saying, fuck you to the other person. Fuck you. You don't get to tell me about me.
Mm-hmm.
And look, that contextually, that might be true, right? Depending on the circumstance. But if it's here's what I think. And I believe this firmly in all of my being. As someone who's been canceled on the internet a couple of times for these thoughts, where I'm like, no, fuck you. You don't tell me what to do, right? It is, your opinion does not matter to me if I do not know you. I do not care what you think about me. Literally, I don't. If you're close to me, you're in my circle, you're my partner, you're my family, and you're like, dude, you're being a fucking asshole. I'm going to be like, okay, let's talk about this, even though it's uncomfortable and it sucks. Because I've played that game before. I know what it looks like when you play that game. It is not fun. It's hurtful. It's painful. It takes from people, takes from you, puts you in a very dire situation.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to be able to look at this from the juxtaposition of whose opinions should you actually value and who should you not? Bro, if I never met you and you send me a DM and you're like, I hate you, I don't give a fuck. Like, I don't care. And that has literally happened to me. I don't care. But if I'm sitting across from you and you're my best friend and you're like, dude, we need to talk. You're being like this. I'm seeing you being out of your integrity. I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to go, how did I get here?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so as people, we have to be willing to look at that and understand that what people see in us is probably true. But
if they care and then they're associated to us in a close way.
correct.
Yeah.
Because if we're sitting here in this moment, your wife comes up to you or whatever, and she's like, dude, we need to talk. You're not showing up in the relationship. You're working too much. You're not taking care of the kids. Every time that we're together, you're disconnected, so on and so forth. And you go, this is just who I am. Well, guess what? That's one step away from contempt. And now you're not going to have a relationship in probably another 6 to 9 months, right? You can track that. But if you sit in it and you go, you're right. Maybe in this moment, I don't have the space to address it because you've caught me off guard, which most people typically do. Do the world a favor. If you're going to address something really difficult for them, be like, hey, do you have the emotional space right now where we can talk about something hard?
Yeah.
Right.
Most people will probably say no.
Yeah. Well, most people will say no. And then you follow it up and you go, I need you to find the space that we can have this conversation within the next 36 to 48 hours.
Yeah. And
if they're unwilling, well, guess what? Now you're still in that space of this is just who I am, ultimate fixed mindset. You're setting yourself up for failure. You also have a responsibility to the people in your life to allot them the space to have the conversation. Right. And so it really truly for me is, and look, it's a practice, man. It's like anything. I'm not saying I'm fucking perfect at it because I'm not. Sometimes I suck, like for real. But that's just the game, right? I'm changing decades of programming.
Sure.
Still. And we all are. And so be open to receiving, especially when you don't want to.
I love that, man. You interview a lot of entrepreneurs, and I imagine on your podcast, you talk about things that drive them or the pain that they've experienced in their past. Have there been any common denominators between what painful moments they've experienced and how that correlates to their drive, or anything that you've pulled away from their ability to use that to build something successful?
That's a fucking great question. And I have an easy answer for that. The people who I have interviewed, who I have found, in my opinion, and probably theirs because it's their life, are the most successful, people I look up to, people who I've had the honor of spending real time with. They all have one thing in common. Like those hardships they have recognized are the worst thing that has ever happened to them. And so if they can reconcile that that is the worst thing that's ever happened to them, they give themselves freedom and permission to go forward, knowing that the worst thing's already happened. So there's no reason to be scared. And so what happens is, and I agree with this, and this is the way that I operate in my life. I know what it's like to be homeless. I know what it's like to steal food to survive. I know what it's like to be 50 grand in debt. And I know what it's like to be on the other side. So if that's my worst case and that's the lowest points of my life and that's where I've been the most stuck, everything else that isn't that is amazing. And so what I see these people leverage all the time is possibility. That's it. They're like, I know what it feels like to be here. You know, I've interviewed Tom Bilyeu. And, you know, he's someone who's played a big role in my life over the years. And he shared something with me one time where I was like, you know, it's interesting when you look at the people who in entrepreneurship specifically, who have built massive businesses. You know, Quest sold for $1 billion. Tom is a very intelligent entrepreneur, arguably the hardest working person I've ever met in my life. And at one point, he was scrounging through the couch cushions to find change to put gas in his car. But that didn't stop him, right? That doesn't stop you unless you choose it to stop you. And what these people are doing, which I think is the most beautiful thing in the world, is that they have the willingness to go for it, despite all of the bad things, right? They're like, okay, I know what these really horrid things are that's happened in my life. So why not go for the possibility of the unknown? Why not just see what happens? I can always go back to scrounging change in the couch cushions. I already know that. They're willing to face the fear. And in that, and I tell people all the time, you want to find out who you are, go be an entrepreneur.
Oh, yeah.
Go chase your dreams. If your dream's working for the company, cool, right? It's still going to require the same effort, energy, and all of the things along the development of oneself to find success at the highest levels, regardless of the industry. But if you really, 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 really want to know who you are, Go start your dream business. Go challenge yourself to do that, because that's where you're going to learn. And what these people have done, you look at him, you look at Jenna Kutcher, you look at Amy Porterfield, look at more people I've had, Dr. Caroline Leaf, Gabor Mate, Muriel Bouquet, these people who have interviewed Tim Story, who's Oprah's coach, incredible human being, even people who I'm going to shout out quickly that you may not know, like my friends, my closest people, Leslie Logan, Felipe Duyan, Tori Gordon, right? Why are we able to build success? It's the same reason those people who have built massive, massive empires have been able to do it, because we're just willing to go down the path. We're willing to face the fear. We're willing to have the identity shift. Yeah. We're willing to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go hard. We're willing to take the space and breaks when we need it. We're willing to ask for help. We're willing to support each other and connect each other and build community. This shit is not that difficult. It's really not. But it's about, are you willing to believe in yourself enough that it seems insane? Because if you're willing to believe in yourself enough that you yourself think that you're fucking crazy, man, the sky's the limit, bro. You know, but you have to be willing to have that level of belief in yourself.
Yeah.
Because if you're not, then you're never going to find success. You're never going to find healing. You're never going to find love. You're never going to find contentment or peace or ease. You're never going to find any of the things that you're seeking, because you're always going to be trapped into the matrix, doing what everybody else told you to do. And there's something about escaping the reality that's set inside. For all of us, we all have walked down the same path. If you grew up in Western countries, in the United States specifically, there's a path. Go to school, raise your hand to go to the bathroom, walk on the right side of the hall, eat lunch when we tell you, go home when we tell you. Do your homework, come back, rinse and repeat. Go to middle school, go to high school, go to college, get a job, get in debt, buy the house, get the car, get the kids, have them do the same fucking shit that you just did, complain about your life all the time, die. Right? Or you can go do what the fuck you want, because you're a human being who has an infinitesimally small percentage chance of being alive, and you might as well fucking go for it.
Yeah. That's great. Do you think that the drivers or the pain is that they've experienced that you've referenced is, and their drive to go build something despite the fear, do you think that's coming more from a place of moving away from what they once experienced, or moving towards something that excites them? I know maybe it's a mixture of both, but if you were to say which one is a stronger pull, what would you say?
I don't know for them specifically. I mean, that's a great question. So I don't want to put words in people's mouths, but I would think that it's both.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at it and it's like, you want to move away from pain,
right?
Which is generally what humans want to do.
Of course.
But then you get comfortable.
Yes.
Right? And comfort is like, I make enough money at the job where the dream can just go on the back burner. It's not that big of a deal. I got health insurance.
Yeah.
Right. And then it's like, okay, cool. Can you step through that and into the possibility of creating your life, moving towards the thing that you want?
Right.
And I think that it's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Right.
Because what I find in very high level achievers is that they use their pain as a driver to prove others wrong, or to prove themselves right, maybe even, but they're using it in a way to, like, as a motivation. And then when they look at that, maybe heal it, and it's less about moving away, there's a drop in drive, because it's not being fueled by insecurity or by fear. Part one. But then part two is, if you can find a new way, a more sustainable way of being pulled towards something that maybe you haven't experienced yet, but your curiosity is driving you towards, and that brings a level of excitement, I find that that is a much more sustainable approach over time, as opposed to being driven by a fear or an insecurity or something that you haven't yet had the courage to process, or maybe you have and you're just holding on to it because it's such an adrenaline boost when you need it.
Yeah. Well, I think it's both, right? So on this one hand, you can use fear of the pain of going back to where you've been to be the catalyst and the lighter fuel for projecting you forward into what's next. But I think that it's also understanding that at some point, if you are going to be successful in whatever it is, that you have to stop negotiating with yourself. And when you stop negotiating with yourself, that leads down a path of discipline. And when you lead down the path of discipline, you actually find freedom,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
To quote Jocko Willink, of course. And when you find that freedom, what happens is inherently, because it is a part of the journey, you learn who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you learn who you are and you know that the thing that actually was the fire at the beginning was your anger towards this situation or moment, when you start to fall out of discipline and fall out of integrity and fall out of the no excuses, just results mentality, the thing that happens is you leverage that dark side and that energy,
Right.
and you use that continue to propel you forward. That's what I think the best people at living life do
Mm-hmm.
when they're trying to build something massive. They don't just stop because it's hard or because they don't want to. They find a way
Mm-hmm.
to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the cornerstone of the success for the people. Now, but there's also the people who they keep going, but they destroy everything in their path on the way there.
Yes.
Right. I did that when I was in my 20s. I mean, landing that job at that Fortune 10 company, making almost $1 million. I mean, there's a 0% chance that I was doing anything that was not self-serving.
Mm-hmm.
It was all me all the time. No real catalyst for life, no real joy, no real happiness, no real growth potential. It was like money or nothing. And if you're in my way, fuck you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a dangerous, dangerous place to be. And you
Right.
see those people, and some of those people have massive success, but it always comes tumbling down.
Agreed.
And so there's something about what you see where the people who are able to navigate and remove the emotion of the if when from the equation and say, I'm going to continue to just show up for me. There's actually a quote. So I have 6 quotes on my bedroom wall, and one of them is from Tom. And it says, pursue things that will be of interest to you and bring you joy, because the struggle is guaranteed, the success is not, right? I have one from David Meltzer. Again, another P. Pursue your consistent and persistent mission of possibility, right? I'm probably butchered that one, but it's really about like looking at it and going, can I continue to go forward, removing money from the equation
Mm-hmm.
and just keep going,
Mm-hmm.
right? I got one from Patrick Bet David and Marcus Aurelius and Kobe Bryant, and you look at those and it's like every single day I read these because it's a reminder that all of these people at one point have had a massive rock bottom and been able to pull themselves out of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the mission.
Love that. There's a quote that I post the other day that is getting some pretty good traction. And when I read it, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't think I've ever read a quote that hit me so hard than this one. It was, the finish line is for the ego and the journey is for the soul.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh my God, dude, that is money. And then what I take from that is like, it's the process. The outcome that we're maybe going for or chasing is only momentary before we're back into the journey, back into the process again. So if you can find something that you love, something that you enjoy being on the pursuit of or being in most of the time, I think that's winning, because you're just developing in that space and you're enjoying it, even though it sucks more times than you hope that it would.
But here's what's interesting about that. What you just said is 100% true, but you can only get there by learning who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because without that, there'll be false pursuits.
Yeah.
Right? Without clear, concise understanding of who you are, by doing the work, by showing up, by going through hell, right? Effectively to understand who you are. All of those things are just words. The actual feeling of that
Mm-hmm.
is so much different when you're like, I'm a human being.
Yeah. Thank you, brother,
Yeah,
for your
man.
courage, for your insights, for your wisdom. For those of you, for them listening, what would you say are some, let's say, 1 to 3 things that they can start on to either integrate their emotions, analyze and understand and sit with their pain to extract the lessons? Like, what would be some things that you would say, start with this and then build from there?
Yeah, stop lying. First and
Amen.
foremost, stop lying to yourself. It was bad. It hurt. It sucked. Whatever it was, the decisions you've made, the people that you've hurt, the way that you treat yourself and look in the mirror, stop lying. Stop. You have anxiety because you're a fucking liar. You have a depression because you're a fucking liar. People don't want to look. This is where I get canceled. It's coming. I'm telling you right now, I'm going to get an email from somebody. Listen, I swear to God, you make this a clip. I promise you somebody's going to DM me. I swear to you. Stop fucking lying. If your life sucks, it's your fault. I'm not saying, no, here's clarity. I'm not saying you're culpable for the bad thing that happened. You're not. You're 8, 7, 12, 15, 20 years old. I'm like, dude, that's not on you. You've got to learn how to heal that. You've got to do the work and show up. If you're 27, 36, 52 years old and your life isn't what you want, it is your fault. People always blaming everybody. And look, I've been the victim. My life at 25 was a victim's life. I know I'm not taking that away. You want to be a victim? Cool. I'm not taking it away from you. You've been through some fucking terrible, terrible, terrible things. And what are you going to do about it? And so that's one. Stop lying to yourself. Look at it, acknowledge it. Yes, it hurts. Yes, it's painful, but that truth will set you free.
Mm-hmm.
So stop lying to yourself. Get help. Raise your fucking hand. Stop being a little bitch and say, I need help. I need somebody to support me here. I need a community. I need a group. I need a coach, a mentor, a therapist. I need something, and go get it. Whatever it costs. You got to borrow money to go to therapy? Bro, borrow money to go to therapy. Literally, there's a post. You don't believe? People don't believe me. I literally made a post in like 2011, 2012, something like that, where I was like, can somebody give me some money so I can go to therapy? It's on my Facebook, right? Publicly, I did that. After I hit up people, I was like, I need help, right? What are you willing to do? Put your fucking humility aside for a moment so you can go create your life. And then I think the third and most important thing is recognize that this is a game of patience.
Mm-hmm.
You are not going to change overnight. Listening to this podcast is not going to fix your life. Showing up to one coaching session is not going to make you better. Like reading a book is not going to be the thing. It's like, this is a process. I tell my clients all the time, when you come into this is a rest of your life game. It just is. I never, ever, ever worked with anyone where at the end of it, they're like, okay, everything's better. Never see you again. It's like the work is just starting then.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Best place to find you, I imagine, is IG.
Yeah, I'm on social everywhere at Michael Unbroken. And of course, Think Unbroken podcast. And I coach literally anyone on planet Earth for free at any time. There's a link on all of my social media to do that.
Beautiful. Thank you for your time, brother. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you. Thanks, man.